Yeah.
Sorry for my long break. I had to make an English muffin, and I got talking to my wife. We're going to New York in a couple of weeks, and we're making some plans. My buddy out there wants to. We owe him a dinner out, and and so he's a pianist in the city, and he's like, well, let's go to. We went to. He took us to Birdland last time. That's where we went, and they were
Nice.
doing an open jam, which is so cool. If you're in the city on a Monday, do Birdland. It's not even that expensive, but he wants to go to Dizzy's, and this lady's playing this. Her name is Kim Nally. I don't know. She's a vocalist, but I don't know who she is. I don't know. I feel like I told him, Minton's Jazz Club is in Harlem, and that's historic where Monk started it all. And I'm like, well, I want to go to Minton sometime, and he's like, yeah, it's okay. He didn't make it sound like it was too great of a club to go to, but.
Well, all I know from that story is that I'm changing my euphemism for taking a shit to making an English muffin.
Oh yeah,
Because I thought that's where the story was going to go. I was making an English muffin in the turlet.
It had lots of nooks and crannies.
Nasty.
Yes.
Hey, look, man, it's 8:15.
I know, right?
Yeah. This is what you get. 100.
I'm Bert.
I'm Drew.
I'm Ron.
I'm Ryan.
And this is the 100 Albums podcast, where we discuss the ins, the outs, and the absurdities of a poster that depicts 100 seemingly random albums. The only music podcast in which we don't actually play any of the music that we talk about. Hey, fellas.
Morning.
Breathe with me. So, welcome everyone. We're happy to have you. We're still going through 100 albums that appear on a poster that Drew got from his wife. We first went through this project by listening to and reviewing 2 albums a week for a year and sharing our thoughts and reactions with each other via video chat. Once we were all done, we thought this might be a fun little project to turn into a podcast. So this week, album number 22, The Fat of the Land by The Prodigy. Vibe check, guys. First impressions. What are you thinking?
Pass.
Pass on the album or pass on your opinion for vibe check?
If you don't accept that as my opinion, then pass on my opinion. Because pass on the album.
Okay, wow. I mean, that's a good one-word answer. I'm not actually there with you. I'm okay with this to some degree. I say my vibe check is alternative, which is what?
That's like so vague.
No, it is.
But so Ryan's teeing it up. He's like, I'm going to give you this little teaser.
That's right.
It's the hook for the audience. He wants the audience to stay. We want to retain listeners.
All right, I'll provide more content for mine. I'll take what Ryan just said and loop from our last U2, something I forgot to mention. It was almost a hot take, but that they were the beginning of adult contemporary. And I just had to get that out. I had to get that off my chest. So we used alternative a lot in that conversation. So there you go. Anyway, still passing on it.
I'll take that and I'll splice that out of this episode and I'll go back and drop it into the YouTube episode for Drew's hot take. Ryan, you were expanding.
Alternative because, well, I don't want to give that away yet, but I just want you in the back of your mind while we listen to this electronica here. But it's electronica being sold to us as alternative music.
Mm-hmm.
I will also mention, Bert, I'm not sure if you picked up on this. I know this is a little much for a vibe check here. But in terms of being marketed as an alternative band, this album was not released under The Prodigy, which would indicate a singular person. This album was sold as Prodigy.
Prodigy, yeah.
Like a band.
Yep.
So that's my vibe check.
Ron, what's your vibe?
I currently listen to this album at work. It's got good energy to it. It's not anything that grabs my attention.
Really? The phrase "smack my bitch up" doesn't, turn heads in the office.
Well, granted, you can't play all the songs in your workplace, but by and large, I mean, it is for me good background music. I mean, it's energetic. I have to have music going like 23 and a half hours a day. And it just keeps me going at times. So, it to me, it's not bad, but it's not something I'm going to seek out and actively listen to. It's a good soundtrack.
Well, I mean, you're all hitting on stuff that for my vibe, I liked it. I've always liked the Prodigy or Prodigy, depending upon how it's marketed. Not something that I'm going out and like, I'm not gonna go buy tickets to see them perform live or something like that, right? But it's been something that I can bob my head to and is enjoyable for me. Ron, I play like in prep for this episode, I was listening to this album in its entirety in my office, and people would walk in and I'd be like, "Ooh, I'm gonna pause this for a second." And we can get into kind of Smack My Bitch Up in particular, but just in general, that perhaps questionable stuff about the group a little bit later on. But kind of the first impression for me, the vibe is that I like this, and how it was sold to Americans and stuff. Well, we can dig into. Ryan, you're already kind of going down some of those trails that I was like, oh wow, okay, I didn't realize that, and so.
And I think the overall vibe is playing on something that's kind of deep rooted into us as our particular age group, right? Because the soundscape is pulling off of that, like that's that area of life that we were told crazy stuff was happening, which was very appealing at our age. Nine Inch Nails kind of had that same thing too, where you've got, like this kind of underground outlaw culture, anti-radio, everything's very private. There's this all these nods to illegal activity and drugs and stuff, and the music to me, as soon as I put it on, I'm transported back into that sensation.
Definitely.
Don't get me wrong, I'm there with all of that nostalgia, and I'm a very true Nine Inch Nails fan, but in comparison of those two, Nine Inch Nails is just so much better. I mean, the first song of Prodigy on the record, the Smack My Bitch Up song, I'm there with it. I'm right there, tapping along. Everything's great. But beyond that, I can't, they can't hold me the whole record. That's my past conversation, but we'll keep talking about it.
Cool. Oh, hey, background really quick. Formed in 1990, based in Essex, England. And I thought it was kind of interesting that one of the articles that I was reading in Rolling Stone refers to Essex as the New Jersey of England. Which I thought was kind of funny. Liam Howlett, Maxim Reality, Leroy Thornhill, and Keith Flint were the group. Liam was the brains behind the operation. He was the producer, primary writer of the music and the songs. Maxim Reality, or Maxim, is a vocalist and MC. Leroy Thornhill was a dancer. And that's it.
I have questions about
similar
that.
to the Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, they had a guy who
they had a hype guy.
Was a dancer.
But in my research, there was several people listed as dancers, and what the fuck?
Yeah, we're getting there.
How does that musically? All right. Well,
so Keith Flint, who becomes the face of the band because of Firestarter, which we'll talk about, he was also initially a dancer, and then gradually did more vocal performing on tracks. So yes, they had two guys in the group who were just supposed to be like, I don't know, doing the running man on the side of the stage, but okay, probably more than that.
Well, I mean,
like glow sticks and whatever else was going on.
I'm sure it was a very natural progression. Like, you don't just start your shows by having Ood Wappa play a vacuum on your stage. It's a gradual bringing in of your fans.
Yes, that is that's a deep cut. Okay. In 1991, they had a club hit with Charlie. It was a tune that they had released. And
modest.
Well, okay, modest here, like in the rave and kind of club scene, it was big. But
it charted number 3.
But then, did you see, Ryan, that there was a bunch of blowback about that?
Big time.
killing rave music and this kind of thing. So
yeah, there's a whole article in Mixmag.
yeah,
And
that's the one I saw too. Yeah,
did you read it? It was
yeah,
really dark.
yeah,
The
yeah.
cover, it's in the cover. He had like a gun to his own head.
Yep,
because he's
that's right.
killing rave.
Killing rave. So around that time, rave culture was kind of migrating from the UK to the United States, late 80s, early 90s. As Ryan alluded to, it was first introduced to the masses in America as electronica. Rick Rubin was big into, so Rick Rubin of Def Jam fame, Beastie Boys, Run DMC, that kind of stuff. He was really trying to find artists that he could promote and produce that would be akin to what he had done with hip hop for kind of rave, house club music that was being, again, kind of sold to. And electronica, kind of an interesting descriptor to begin with, because it sounds like a child's musical plaything to me. Like when I hear something, oh, that's an electronica, or whatever. Hey, I'm being honest. So no artists in that genre wanted to be described as electronica. And we've seen that before in the grunge era. There were very few grunge bands that were like, oh yeah, we're grunge, But basically it grew out of warehouse parties in Los Angeles, New York City, techno and house music, that were being popularized in Detroit and Chicago, exactly. Single-based songs. So you didn't get a lot of artists that created albums. You had artists who would, create a song that then would be used in clubs and it would be part of a DJ's kind of package or whatever. So the Prodigy were pioneers of this in this kind of era of breakbeat influenced genre that became known as big beat. Other artists, Fatboy Slim, Chemical Brothers, Propellerheads, Crystal Method, and more. The notion of this big beat sound came from the Big Beat Boutique, owned by Norman Cook, also known as Fatboy Slim. So had a club, they played a lot of this kind of music, and that's how the genre kind of grew from there. From an article in NPR in 2011, Norman Cook, Fatboy Slim, said, quote, "I always thought the formula of big beat was the breakbeats of hip-hop, the energy of acid house, and the pop sensibilities of the Beatles, with a little bit of punk sensibility all rolled into one. People like the Prodigy and the Chemical Brothers, we saw it as very similar to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, who grew up listening to soul records and blues records and then sold an English version of it back to America." A lot there, but I thought that was an interesting way to describe kind of the big beat notion. Prodigy themselves described their style as electronic punk, which I think is a pretty good description. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But for right now, why don't we take a quick break before we get into a little more of the background and hear from one of this week's sponsors? Would you guys
One
of? Yes, there are two this week.
Man, we're doing good.
Can you believe it? I'm going to play an advertisement from this week's sponsor.
Hello. Looking for a funeral home? Join us right beside the gas station on Route 8. We'll take care of you. Or your loved one. Check out our website, www.herbfuneralhome.com.
Oh, man.
So thank you to the Herb Funeral Home.
A voice from the other world.
Yeah, that was
beyond the veil. So thank you to the
gas station,
to the Herb Funeral Home for their generous sponsorship of the 100 Albums podcast.
Yeah, brand new one.
Visit their website. Okay, getting back into a little bit of the background here. We've talked about kind of how the group was coming up. As you would imagine, describing themselves as electronic punk, some controversy is going to kind of follow along with some of the things that they're doing. So kind of reference Smack My Bitch Up as one of the songs that was popular off of this album. National Organization of Women objected to the seeming misogyny of Smack My Bitch Up, though the band maintained that its true interpretation it was doing anything intensely. That was when they talked about smacking your bitch up, it was doing stuff intensely. Liam Hallett quote, "That record was for the fans. Only brainless people get some stupid message out of it. I'm often misquoted. Some magazines said Liam Hallett and his band are dangerous. What I said was, for this band to survive, it has to be dangerous for us. I wasn't saying we are dangerous because we're fire starters and have spiky hair."
Well, I want to note on that real quick because I
Yeah.
read lots of his interviews, and I don't think he had a plan, because he changes his perspective sometimes mid sentence on a lot of his stuff. I think that he found that hook from, who was it? Cool Keith.
Ultramagnetic MCs, but yeah.
And he used it and did not think about the consequence. And then when it was time to deal with the consequence, just didn't know what to do. So he just kept changing his mind. I don't think he was smart enough to be like, no, we don't care about this. Oh, and then, we also care about this.
You're breaking into my hot take, but
sorry.
I think you're absolutely right, Ryan. I don't think this was planful. So the other thing, so really quickly about Smack My Bitch Up, the phrase is a sample from Give the Drummer Some by hip hop group Ultramatic MCs. It is Cool Keith, you're right. Liam Hallett stated the song was misinterpreted. Several radio stations limited the song's airplay to nighttime hours. MTV did the same. The video was graphic. I had to do some digging to go out, and I had forgotten just how graphic the video was. I mean, and it takes a lot to, shock me in my old age now or whatever, but I can see where in the 90s that would have been like super taboo, right? Well, now it's like you can stream it on Max and it's no big deal or whatever.
Do you guys remember when that came out? Like,
do you
remember seeing it?
So I remember on MTV, because we were in college, I remember Kurt Loder having to come on and be like, hey, what you're about to see is jarring to some viewers, like every time they played it. And they would only play it like at 1 o'clock in the morning or something on 120 minutes. But U.S. chains Walmart and Kmart deemed the marketing campaign for the single offensive, and they pulled Fat of the Land from their shelves.
But not before it was too late.
Yeah, too late, right? Yeah.
I mean,
because it all kind of happened later.
It made it through Warner Brothers without them even noticing. They sold it without a parental advisory sticker.
Yeah. At the 1998 Reading Festival, the Prodigy and the Beastie Boys had an onstage disagreement. The Beastie Boys, they were performing together, and the Beastie Boys requested them to not play Smack My Bitch Up from their set, as it could be considered offensive. Prodigy ignored that plea. Maxim introduced the song, quote, "They didn't want us to play this fucking tune, but the way things go, I do what the fuck I want." That's punk rock, guys. Like, that's really, you know what I mean? Like, whether or not you agree with it, they're like, hey, you know what? I'm gonna do whatever I want. The other thing that I found,
I kind of disagree with that a little bit, because I think the true spirit of punk isn't just being an asshole for being asshole's sake. Usually, if you look at what's going on in punk, it's more about anti-establishment. If anything, I'd say they're very, pro rights for everybody. It's not about putting people down. So saying that they're kind of being punk, I think they're just being assholes.
Yeah, it keeps revolving in my head as I listen to you talk, Bert. Like, just I'll repeatedly say this, but that's where I'm like, I don't know. I just don't believe it, you guys. But
So the other thing that I found, which I was unfamiliar with at the time, and only because I didn't own this album, I just, I heard it around or whatever. And then once we got into the digital era, I would download, Napster, pirated downloads or whatever. The liner notes to the album, in the liner notes to this record, there's a quote from Hermann Göring, who was Hitler's right-hand guy. He's the guy who founded the Gestapo in Nazi Germany. And the quote is, "Steel, we have no butter. But I ask you, would you rather have butter or guns? Shall we import lard or steel? Let me tell you, preparedness makes us powerful. Butter merely makes us fat." So they have a Nazi quote in the liner note to their album. And of course, you're going to get questions about that. Like, why are you quoting a Nazi, bro? And so in Rolling Stone article in 1997 by Chris Heath, he's interviewing the guys from the band. And Hallett, he says, quote, "Hallett read it in a book of quotations he was given by his record company for Christmas a couple of years back, and he liked it. Of course, this being the don't care, won't care Prodigy, nothing is so simple. The quote is lifted and slightly adapted from a speech that Hermann Göring, the Nazi who founded the Gestapo, gave in 1936. Howlett says, quote, "It just fitted well in with the whole vibe of the album. Not obviously from the Nazi point of view, but b-boy culture. It scared me when I read it. It's such a powerful quote, but it's really scary. Butter or guns. It stuck in my head. I thought it was perfect for what we wanted." I presume the Prodigy favor guns, as Gehring did. Quote, Liam, "Yeah, it's just kind of a dumb attitude, thinking that that can be the answer. I haven't thought about it that deeply. It just seemed to fit. So I put this to Flint. There's not many groups who dare to use a quote from a Nazi in their album sleeve. Yeah, he says, laughing. I know that's all part of it. That's all part of being the Prodigy. It's just the way we take the piss. Make not everyone like us."
But that really sounds like it goes back to doing research, not thinking about the ramifications of something.
Ron, I was just going to say, I think this is where Ryan is absolutely right. I think they're
winging it.
They're just winging it. Yeah, they're just kind of doing whatever and
Living by the minute.
Living by the minute. That's right. So, in a 2002 article in The Independent, Martin Smith said, quote, "The Prodigy court controversy like school children who smoke behind the bike sheds just to look hard in front of cool kids, according to some quarters of the media. In the case of Liam Howlett, Keith Flint, and Maxim, the cool kids are the punk rock old guard of Johnny Rotten and others." So maybe I should amend my statement saying that's punk rock. I'm saying that's wannabe punk rock.
Yeah,
because I think they're really chasing that type of
that vibe,
that attitude, right?
Well, it's really easy when you do something. I don't want to blurt my hot take out, but when you stumble into making a good song. This is my kind of attitude about these guys. You stumble into making a good song, all of a sudden you became famous, and you can't really back it up with any more music. But you embrace that attitude because, man, can you imagine almost the four of us just all of a sudden becoming celebrities and not knowing how to handle that, especially at whatever age these guys were,
Yeah.
Well, and we've talked about other artists being punk or punk rock. Johnny Cash, I think it came up in the Dolly discussion as well. But those people had thought behind it and intent. And, Ryan kind of nailed it with, punk has a purpose. You can't just be an asshole. You have to have thought behind it. So to that end, these guys were chasing it, but they weren't deep enough to do it.
Yeah.
Is punk your intent or your post-successful behavior, I guess,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So this album specifically, released on June 30th, 1997 through XL Recordings, received critical acclaim and topped the UK Albums Chart and the US Billboard 200. It sold over 10 million copies worldwide. It is their, by far, best-selling album. Keith Flint, as we talked about, started as a dancer, but Firestarter was the first song on which he did vocals, and then that became kind of everybody's, the hair, it was shaved in the middle with the spiky on the sides. But he also did vocals on Breathe, Serial Thriller, and Fuel My Fire. Became the face of the band, basically. All of the songs were written and produced by Liam Howlett on this album, except for Fuel My Fire, which is an L7 cover. As I mentioned earlier, Howlett is the guy who is, he was the creative force behind it.
He's the Prodigy.
Exactly.
That's an L7 cover?
That's an L7 cover, yeah. Additional musicians, which I thought was really interesting. Matt Cameron, who is the drummer for Pearl Jam, does the drums on Narayan. We talked about Cool Keith already. There's a guitar player on Fuel My Fire whose name is Jizzbutt. Or so it's spelled. So it's Gizzbutt. So it could be Gizbutt.
Oh yeah, they're British.
But that's not as funny. So there's that, and then also there's on the Japanese release there's a bonus track called No Man Army where Tom Morello is a guest guitarist. So they did have some really interesting folks that appear on the album.
Like what year was that? Tom Morello joining in, or Matt Cameron for that matter, because he did join Pearl Jam for a while. So
97. So I mean, as far as Rage Against the Machine goes, I mean that's right in their arc.
And he was in Pearl Jam by then. So
yeah. A couple of notes I had.
Matt Cameron was in Soundgarden at that time, wasn't he?
I think he was doing a lot of it because the Brucey's was only on 10, I think. Ryan, do you know any history on that? He wasn't with him for long.
Well, yeah, Matt Cameron was Soundgarden's drummer, and then after Pearl Jam went through all theirs, then and Soundgarden wasn't playing anymore. Then he went to Pearl Jam.
He may have even appeared on 10 for all I know. I mean, he was in quick.
Yeah. I had a couple of notes on some samples and things, but we can hold on.
Yeah, before we get to samples, because we're still talking about the album release. Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
I did find a really neat note here from our good friend who I quote a lot, Khalifa Sanaa, about our friend Keith Flint and how this was marketed to us, which I just think kind of really sums it up well. The Prodigy, having survived Charlie, released an album called The Fat of the Land, which sent a pair of videos into heavy rotation on MTV. Viewers were mesmerized not by the breakbeat or by Liam Howlett, the group's producer and keyboardist, but by a grimacing guy with a double mohawk who snarled a few lyrics. Now he was being presented, in essence, as the furious frontman of a new band called The Prodigy, new to America, where few people had any idea what Charlie was, or where The Fat of the Land sold more than 2 million copies. So I just wanted to solidify how this was marketed as opposed to an electronica album.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not just my opinion.
So when the album came out, it spent 57 weeks on and peaked at number 1 on the Billboard 200. Firestarter spent 20 weeks on the Hot 100 chart and peaked at number 20. Smack My Bitch Up spent 7 weeks on the Hot 100 chart and peaked at number 89. Along with those two, Breathe also spent time on the U.S. Modern Rock Tracks chart as well as the U.S. Hot Dance Music charts. So they were getting some buzz both on both sides of the pond. So that's kind of the background. Well, I've got more context and I want to talk about samples and stuff, but I wasn't sure, is this a good spot to maybe pause and hear from this week's second sponsor?
2 sponsors in 1 week, you guys.
It's
we're going to be going to the bank with
it's
this.
all when I walk outside of my house, I see people waving at me from the road like
in hot air ballones? Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet.
Yes,
not
it's
yet.
Not hot air balloon season right now.
Where's that?
It's cold air balloon season.
All right. Toasty Toast, once again, has provided us with a generous sponsorship, and we'll hear from them right now.
Toasty's Toast is tickled to bring to the 100 Albums podcast our latest tasty treat, Toasty Toast Toppers. You've taken your delicious bread, you've cooked it again, now what? Top your toast with our Toasty Toast Toppers. Try any of our delicious topper flavors. Branson Barbecue, Chilean Chili, Taney Como Thai, Buffalo, and Missouri Marmalade. How do you improve on perfection? With Toasty Toast Toppers. Proudly made outside Branson, Missouri, on the shores of Lake Taney Como.
Toasty Toast makes Toasty Toasty.
Oh, it's so good. Thank you, Toasty Toast. Toasty Toast.
I got a Reddit question for Toasty Toast someday, because I heard the other day that some people toast only one side of the bread.
Well, you can do that in a bagel toaster. Like if you've got a toaster that can do both sides or just one side for a bagel. But I think that would, for toast, it's always double-sided, man.
I mean, you could do that, I guess, if you're a communist.
A lot of politics in this episode today.
I guess.
Well, that's what happens when you bring up Prodigy, aka the Prodigy. So this album, if you guys recall, and I've talked about this before as being an alternative album, it was actually up and lost. It was up for a award, wasn't it? In alternative rock, it lost to Radiohead's OK Computer.
Yeah,
he's good.
But think about that. That's actually a really big momentum swing for electronica.
Yeah.
To get that notoriety. Admittedly, I mean, it's different today the way the genres are. I think the whole sound of music is much more global than it was then.
Yeah.
But for something like that to be recognized, it would have been the more prestigious award than an electronica award. It's pretty notable.
Yeah. Yeah. I that speaks to something that I had in my notes here about. I think the reason that not only electronical generally, but Prodigy specifically was appearing in more of that kind of alternative, I'll put scare quotes around alternative music, is because of the harder, for lack of a better description, sound that they had. So if you compare the Prodigy or Prodigy to, the Chemical Brothers or to Propellerheads, other big beat kind of sounds, and I just did a bunch of listening to that kind of music this week. So I'm like, it's all four on the floor songs to me all the time. Yeah. But the Prodigy definitely has a more harder edge, a rockier sound than like Fatboy Slim, for example, who's doing stuff like Praise You, which by the way was still appearing on like modern rock and alternative charts at that time. And I can kind of see it with Prodigy, not nearly as much with Rockefeller Skank or something like that.
Right.
But so I've always kind of chalked it up to that. Okay, I can see where dude bros who are interested in Radiohead might also be interested in Prodigy.
Well, yeah, you're right. You're nailing it. The timbres that they zeroed in on are much buzzier, much chunkier. Are we going to go into the album's music?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's. Okay. So
I feel like we've discussed Smash might be Smash.
Smash.
Smash my butter.
That's that movie with Brad Pitt and Jason Statham, right? No, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, let's talk about it. Good, bad, ugly. What do you guys got for the good, bad, ugly?
My kids love this album. And I'm not joking on this.
They know all the words thanks to you. So
I know, right? No. So take Smack My Bitch Up out of it. I'm sitting there listening to the album, writing my notes down and stuff. And my 5-year-old's playing with his Legos and he's building stuff. And I look over and he's bobbing his head, and he just looks at me and goes, "Daddy, I like this song." And I was like,
what song was it? Do you remember?
It was Serial Thriller.
Well,
okay.
Kids love cereal.
As far as good, bad, ugly, I will give them props for Breathe. I'm my job, during the day is in the psychology field, and I get annoyed when artists or people in general use mental health terms inappropriately. People will say something schizophrenic when actually what they're probably describing is bipolar. But I give them credit because they use the term psychosomatic properly. So to me,
given their history with words, maybe luck.
Most doubtedly, probably luck.
That's a big one.
Yeah. But most of the songs I dig on, like I said at the top, it's not something where I'm going to sit down with headphones on and listen to the intricacies of it, or hey, this is great songwriting. No, it's good background stuff. I do have a question for Bert on Diesel Power. All right, so is the rapping just off, or does it suck? Because to me,
that's in my bad.
it's so close to like, hey, this isn't bad, but there's something about it, whether it's the phrasing, the timing, the words, something. I'm just like, oh, that
yeah. So that's Maxim Reality, who does the vocals on that. So my note was the intro to Diesel Power has a real Daft Punk feel to it until the vocalist enters, and then like nope.
Yeah.
And who am I to say they sold a bajillion of these albums? So who am I to critique it? But just not my flavor of hip hop lyricist.
Well, it's that,
and I also think too, this isn't hip hop, right? So there's a different vibe to, if they had gotten Q-Tip to do the lyrics here, it probably still wouldn't have sounded great to me because of the contrast in styles for me. But yeah, I had that as a bad too, was the lyrics on Diesel Power.
I think that kind of rapping along with that kind of fake British accent was a time in that era that we've talked about the
Yeah.
first time around this thing, and so weird in the early '90s to do that. But that cadence that they use is just god awful.
I did have another question for the group because you guys all have wonderful ears, much better than mine in some instances. On Minefields, did they sample a fucking cat?
I don't know. That one I could get past the synthetic Kodo melody. That one, that's my least favorite track on the whole album.
There's a sample in there that sounds like they sampled a friggin' cat screaming. Like, Ryan, I thought, holy shit, they have your cat on here.
They better not.
Because they didn't pay you no royalties.
My notes on Minefields was I have tuned out now, and I didn't listen past that song.
So I actually, one of the things I as listening to the album as a whole, which I gave it a double listen, is there's a sort of, and I've talked about this with other albums, but a kind of slickness or plasticiness about the way this is put together. Like you could see this being in an underground club, and you could also see it like in the background of an episode of Charmed. You know, like it just sort of paints a picture of this is the bad guy stuff, and it does it in a way that's so close to artificial. Keith Flint's vocals are like almost, I'm intentionally being creepy, you know, like it's like, okay, we get it, you know, like nice. In a lot of the music choices, like Breathe, as you mentioned, Ron, like that kind of insistent pair of minor thirds, you know, to kind of like really, hey, not only are we in minor, but we're going to make sure you have the leading tone to really make it feel dark and spooky, you know, like, okay, like that kind of stuff doesn't impress me as much. And the, you know, some of the crunchy tone choices get a little bit repetitive for me, although I like the dissonance involved in that. And I think a lot of electronic in this era is prone to that over knob twisting for timbre changes. You know what I'm talking about? It's like,
yeah.
Right.
Those LFO filters.
Yes, but some of the other stuff like surprised me in good ways too. Like I guess I just didn't listen to this as much as I thought in the 90s, but like in funky shit, when that SWAT theme comes in, I was like, what the heck was that? The mega track, Narion, which is 9 minutes plus, that's almost all original stuff. There's only 6 samples in that, and 3 of which are drum samples. So like they're really trying to do something there.
Yeah.
By the way, in Climatize, which I love the spelling of, did anyone catch the notable sample in the background of that one?
No.
Climatize. I didn't have a note on that.
I was out by then.
Well,
I could not go.
If you give it a re-listen, Won't Get Fooled Again by The Who.
Oh, The Who. Yeah,
Really?
I see it now. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
so I did a quick, just go ahead, give me 1 second, Drew. I looked up Minefields and Ron, to your question, and because I didn't have anything notable about it in my notes, there's no samples in that, or at least according to whosampled.com. So maybe there's maybe they were literally standing there with a cat and like squeezing it.
But no samples also doesn't. I mean, that means there's no sampling. I mean, he has keyboard samples. He's got
right. Yes.
So he may have had a synth sound that just came out called Cat. Or square cat.
Some patch.
Depends on if you had a Casio or a Roland at the time.
Yeah, sawtooth cat.
Yes.
Go ahead, Drew. You were going to go into yours.
Well, just on that funky shit track, of course, was a Beastie Boys sample, but also a Bjork. I don't know. I can't even tell you the song, but I just wrote down Bjork, and I remember what I was thinking. And she uses that weird horns sample that's like she uses that on a couple of her tracks, and I don't know. That's it's always a neat little thing to recognize a sample from somebody else who has sampled it. And I did not bother to find out where that's from, but that was the song, and this kind of culminates my bad, I guess, in a way with these guys. Like to me, they just scratched the surface, saving some things for my hot take here. But at this point of the record, I wrote, all I can think of is Rolled. I misspell it, but it's Rolled from Letterkenny, the emo guys that dance in front of Dollar General. Like,
Yes.
It's just
Stuart.
It's
Stuart.
Almost, yes. Like, it's almost too. It's just too much of one thing. And
Oh, that's so good.
and believe me, I don't not like this. It's just I can't take a bite out of it, you know.
Oh my God, that Drew, that should have been your.
No shit.
Well, it's not a
Oh,
revelation.
so good.
It's just a comment, you know. It's not like a revelation, but I had to share that.
You're in front of the grocery store the other day.
It's so time for a rewatch of that show. It's so time.
So good, bad, ugly for me. Good. You guys have touched on a lot of it. Like the sampling is really good. I like the funky shit root down sample from the Beastie Boys. I like that a lot of the song I mentioned earlier, Four on the Floor, and that's not accurate for this album because a lot of the bass drum kick in these songs are more of a syncopated feel. And I thought boom, 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 that kind of thing. So, and I really, really like that as instead of just the kind of the 4/4 pulse the whole time. I mentioned earlier other artists in this genre, Chemical Brothers, Propellerheads as examples. I like them a lot better. So I like this record and I like kind of what some of the things these guys are doing. But for the record, I like what other artists in the big beat genre are doing better. I like the opening on Minefield because it sounded like something from a Depeche Mode record. It really had like some of that 80s alt kind of feel to it. Bulls on Parade, we talked about Rage Against the Machine. That sample appears in Smack My Bitch Up, which I thought was really cool. But it also includes In Memory Of by Randy Weston, which is a fantastic song. You can go down a rabbit hole on some of these samples, obviously. I also found some research that I thought was really, really interesting. So Kim Deal of the Pixies / Breeders fame in kind of the alternative rock area has a writing credit on Firestarter because of the sample of the Breeders song SOS. There's a guitar solo sample there. And because it's so prominent, Kim Deal got a writer's credit, which I thought was really interesting. And then the last thing I had for in the good section, we've seen this before. Shaolin and Wu-Tang, the movie, 1981. There's a sword sound effect sample in, which song is it? I don't remember now.
So Breathe.
yeah.
Yes, thank you. Breathe. But it also appears in Wu-Tang's The Mystery of Chess Boxing. And also Glass by Incubus, in case you're curious. So on the bad side, Smack My Bitch Up has an intro that's 8 bars too long for me, for my ear. The beat should drop 8 bars sooner than it does.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little, whatever. And then the other thing I said too, and I think Drew, you've talked a little bit about this. There's something of a monotonous effect that happens after a while. Things are kind of going, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready for the next thing to happen, whatever that either end the song or move on to a different section.
Well,
however, I was just gonna say, Drew. However, in parentheses, I've got counterpoint. See Ryan's previous comments from a previous episode. I don't remember which one. Music as function, because the point of these songs is you're in the club, you're probably high on something, and you're going till 6 a.m. So you have to have something to kind of keep you going. So anyway,
I had
ugly. Get
ugly.
I say the ugly thing I have is the Nazi stuff. Obviously, I don't feel like there's any argument to say, oh well, this is why we included this quote. It's fucking Nazis, dude.
No, you don't get a
you don't get a pass on that. So that was my good, bad, ugly.
I just had a couple rhythm things because you actually helped me decode my own writing just a second ago. You were talking about the lack of the 4 on the floor beat. And I think what I noted here and I wrote down was absence of the 3. And I feel like there's a lot of these beats are like 1, 2, but I got 1, 2, like, so they remove the 3 and then they have almost like a fill pattern that drives you back to 1. And it's a kind of a theme on a lot of the beats on this album, which is pretty cool.
Interesting.
And then I also put down, we have had a lot of albums where by the end of it, you get, as Drew mentioned, he had some fatigue. And what I liked on this album is, I think it's the fastest song is the last one. Like you could feel the beats per minute are just a couple hairs higher than they should be on Fuel My Fire. And it's like, it's I think kind of a reward in some ways. It's as opposed to like arcing down. They're like, we're going to push you all the way to the top, which for the
Yeah.
culture would have been pretty fun. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Still blown away. That's an L7 cover. Like seriously, like you just blew my mind straight off the top of the episode. That is my favorite song on this album.
Yeah.
I wish more was like it, but it doesn't surprise me that it's a cover either.
I like Firestarter. I think
Yeah.
and that video is so iconic. As soon as I put it back up on YouTube to watch it, I was like, oh yeah, this one. that guy.
Yeah. Yep. What song would you remove to make this album better? One song.
Minefields.
And
I suppose since that's where I said I tuned out, I would agree with that.
you could take Climatized, Firestarter, Funky Shit, or Diesel Power off for me.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of
Okay.
hit some of my favorite ones, Ron. That hurts my feelings.
I was just gonna
I don't
say
care
those
about
are-
your feelings. I'm punk rock, motherfucker.
That's right.
Oh, that's good.
Oh,
That's
boy.
good. Okay, results and ratings. Individual
Bert,
scores. Yeah.
Before
sure.
you get into that, we need
Sure.
to come clean. Since it's been brought up again, Funky Shit. Yes, it was a Beastie Boys sample, but it first was, of course, Jimmy Smith. That's where Beastie Boys got it. They
We're
didn't.
down.
They sampled it first. So,
Yeah.
but also, I just wanted to say, man, since you brought it up, Cannonball. I listened to Cannonball the other night. That song is just so good. Just 2
Yeah.
nights ago,
Right.
going back to Kim Deal here.
The Breeders,
just,
man.
Just had to double down on that one.
Yeah.
Man, that's a good song.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
she's got a new album out, you know.
I saw she's in the news again.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I heard one of the singles on our radio station here in town.
Yeah.
Sweet.
So individual ratings. I gave it a 7. Drew gave it a 3.5. Ryan gave it a 3.5. It was an average score of 4.67. Ron, what would you?
This
10
album is an anomaly. And I can't remember if our threshold was 6 or 7 to buy the album.
5.
Oh, it was a 5 to buy the
Yeah.
album?
Yeah.
Well, that was mine.
That was Ryan's threshold. Yes.
Right,
yes.
right.
So
All
your
right,
threshold can be whatever.
Well, I know, but general consensus of ranging, we'll call it 5 to 7. Prodigy for me falls into the range of I like it. Like I would give it a 6.5, 7, but I would not buy this.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it, but it's not something I'm going to put on my turntable and listen around the house.
Right. So Drew, Ryan, you guys gave it a 3.5. Would you change that score?
I would. I would raise it. I'm not sure how much. Maybe just a point, like to 4.5.
Yeah.
I found it a much more interesting listen this time around. I wouldn't probably buy this, but for the same reason as Ron, it's not that I found anything like completely disliking about the album. I
Right.
just don't. I can't imagine needing to scratch it often enough, that itch of this sound, to put it on. But I think it does what it does very well.
Yeah, I don't have complaints about everything with it, but it's so backgroundy to me that a 3.5 to me is like a penny tip. It's like I'm not gonna give it a 1.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna give it more. I could never hear it again, and I'd be perfectly fine. It was very nostalgic to hit the first track and of course Firestarter, the songs that I knew, but I did not finish it. I was like, I'm just not gonna do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well, just as an FYI, we rank this guy number 72 in our 100 albums, so it's in the bottom half. Similar to kind of what Ron and Ryan were just saying, I gave it a 7. It's not necessarily there. As I mentioned earlier, there are other artists in this genre that I would buy first. So
yeah.
I still like this album, but I mean, I have Propeller Heads in my collection already. I have some Fatboy Slim in my collection already. So I never purchased this album legally. So, hey, let's go to Margaritaville. If this artist or album had a restaurant or a chain of restaurant, a la Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville, what would it be called and what would the theme be?
Oh man,
I don't know about a name, but it's going to be a hibachi joint.
Yeah, I see a lot of
fire.
a lot of action, a lot of busyness.
Well, you already touched on it, guys, with the joke earlier, but it would be a breakfast joint for me, and it'd be called Cereal Thriller, and it would be spelled CEREEL.
I figured
Frosted Flakes for as far as the eye can see. You know?
The drink special would be, I think, like Blue Mountain Dew with a lot of hot sauce in it.
No, we would bring back Four Loko or something. Right?
I just reinvented what they already did. Four Loko. There you go.
You
I
know,
forgot about that.
it could be a barbecue place and just be smack my butt up, you know, and they do like just smack the rub on the pork.
There you go.
Know?
There you go.
Nice.
Okay, hot take time. Who's got a hot take about this album or artist?
I'm not sure how hot it is. I think it's, and you guys, you feel free to opt out of my hot take if you feel like this does not apply to you. I think had it not been pushed as an alternative rock album, the four of us would have never heard this album. I don't think we were not hip enough into deeper pools of music in the 90s to know this album had it not been sold to us.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't disagree, Ryan. I think that, I mean, they got airplay on radio stations that would have been on our dial, and airplay on MTV, even if it was at 1 o'clock in the morning. My hot take, it kind of
whoa, I'm not done.
Oh, you're not done. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that was just getting you all to agree with me.
You did some mind games there.
My hot take is, I think other albums in genres outside of our listening spectrum at that time period, we may be treating unjustly because we weren't sold them in this manner. So if you look back on other albums we've listened to, like the Massive Attack and the Screamadelica, that were, if they had been marketed to us via MTV as an alternative rock style, I think we would have had much more favorable reviews of them, and I think that's on us. This is how we were taught.
Yeah,
I blame marketing
because there would have been more of that nostalgia,
more exposure. Even
yeah.
I mean, I didn't have a lot of ways to access this kind of information back then if you didn't know somebody who knew somebody. So that's my hot take that I'm hoping to carry with me to future episodes.
Well, very good.
It does not affect my opinion of Tim McGraw.
So, along with yours, I did have a realization. I won't call it an epiphany, but I did have a realization with this album. I think I understand, with the rave culture, dance, how this album is to be listened to. And it's not in my wheelhouse. Like, I don't have a frame of reference for this. I've never been to a rave, although I've always wanted to. I'm too fucking old now. But a lot of the music we listen to, it has goals. It hasn't, it's trying to, bring across integrity, express feelings. Some is just for pop and to make money. Some is to spark a revolution or thought. But Prodigy's goal is just to simply make you dance and move. And I understand it with this album. And so, going forward and looking at other albums that, because of my own bias, my knee-jerk reaction is to say, fuck this shit, I don't like it, and talk smack on it. With this one, it was kind of like, okay, you need to step outside yourself a little bit. All right, what's up, Bert?
Well, Ryan just texted the group a gif of the
skids.
The skids from Letterkenny dancing.
Ron, you were
thanks, Ryan. I'm pouring my fucking heart out here, and you're texting the group goddamn gifts.
Ron really did open up there. Ron was wide open.
Hey, I'm just being punk.
Well, my hot take, not very hot at all, and we've kind of talked about it a little bit, but I don't think these guys were Nazis or misogynists. I think they were accidental provocateurs. Smack My Bitch Up generated a ton of attention. Keith Flint was avant-garde looking, to put it nicely, and I think that's really what it was all about, kind of provoking a response, intentionally or otherwise. And I don't think that's why you know, we've talked before about separating the art from the artist and some of that kind of stuff. I would not, you know, ostracize Prodigy as a musical artist because they're related to Nazis or something like that. You know what I mean? I wouldn't equate them to, you know, Nazism or something. So anyway, that's my.
Which, by the way, you could do with Chumbawamba.
Yes.
Oh,
I don't know if you guys know that.
Yeah.
No,
It's maybe worth a mini episode, but there's Nazi ties there.
Yeah.
as if
Yep.
that song wasn't enough to hate them.
I know.
Well,
Good point,
but that song, like many one-hit wonders, sounds nothing like the rest of their catalog. But
I wouldn't
anyway,
know.
yeah.
Yeah.
But truly, though, if you didn't buy the album, how the fuck would you even know that there's a Nazi quote on there?
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, it was written about at the time, but not pervasive. Like
Right.
it didn't result in people burning stacks of Prodigy CDs or something. So
You guys know, by the way, that Chumbawamba's going on tour with Oasis on that tour.
Good Lord.
I did
Yeah,
not know that.
They get on stage for one number. It's called Chumbawamba Wall.
Oh, man.
Oh my god, dude!
My hot take is, you know, I liked their hits quietly back then because at a certain point in my life, I had great interest in the development of this kind of EDM music. But as everything has a family tree and goes different directions, I found myself completely uninterested in this stuff as much as, you know, what Bjork did with that stuff. Of course, I keep bringing her up, but and Nine Inch Nails, Trent Reznor, I mean, he's a genius, and he took this and made it into art at the same time as these guys. But Ron, you just put it nicely that maybe they weren't trying to make art, maybe they were just trying to make people dance, which is okay. That's fine. But here you have just that it got me thinking about the spectrum of, well, just tree branches out of the central, you know, idea of EDM and where we've gone with it all. But, you know, again, with these guys, the controversy, the punk quote attitude, and this is when I lose interest with musicians, because if your attitude overshadows your music quality, I'm going to have you sit at the little kids table. Like I lose it. I'm here for your music, and I'll take your politics. I love music for purpose, but you've got to back your point up with music, and I don't think these guys had a point anyway. They were just, you know, they were just partying, they were having fun, and again, that's fine. But anyway, and I've got another overarching hot take that Ryan actually dipped into here, and it is simply this, and actually because of this project over the past couple of years when we were doing this, like Rick Rubin's influence on everything we know is so incredibly present. I mean, do we even know how to think about music, or are we just doing what Rick Rubin has said to do all along? It's crazy.
Mm-hmm. That's
That's
a scorcher.
Yeah.
Man, I can't say it's a bad thing, but it's wild. I guess I never knew when we were younger how, and it goes back. I mean, he's been doing this forever.
Yep. Well, since his dorm room at NYU.
Oh my God. It's incredible.
NYU, I think. Yeah. All right, guys. Any other final thoughts? No? All right. Hey, folks, do yourself a favor. Go out and listen to Fat of the Land by The Prodigy and let us know what you think. Write to us at 100albums@bertislow.com. That's 100albums at BERTISLO.com. You can connect with us on Facebook or Instagram at 100 Albums Podcast, or at our website, 100albumspodcast.com. Join us next week as we chat about Daft Punk's 2001 banger, Discovery. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. If you liked this one, you're going to love that one. That's it, fellas.
Week.
We'll see you next week.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah.
Ron's already out, man. He's like, no, I gotta go. My back teeth are floating.